the topic of English girls is kind of an interesting one because especially guys who do day game in London often tend to find that English girls are a little bit more difficult and more success tends to be with the foreign girls. So, either tourists or girls who've kind of recently arrived in the country. Obviously, there is a correlation there and there is some, patterns that you can obviously draw conclusions from. Even myself, if you look at my kind of London infields, a lot of the time the girls aren't even English, they're from other countries. In my case, it's not so much that I avoid English girls, it's more the fact that I tend to find foreign girls more attractive, just generally. Because obviously you need to be somewhat attracted to the girl in order to approach her in the first place, ideally. That's pretty much the reason for that. I also tend to find they're not necessarily the most feminine compared to other nationalities as well, based, personality-wise as well. So that's kind of my interpretations of that. A lot of guys say similar things as well. It's pretty similar. Guys who've been in the game for a while, they tend to say the same thing. So it's not exactly like groundbreaking news, but yeah. I think not necessarily the fact that girls are more difficult. It's more the case that they're more likely to have boyfriends in general because of the fact that they're natives, and the same applies for other countries as well. Generally speaking, natives are going to be more likely to have boyfriends and therefore be a little bit more difficult to get results from, or a bit more difficult to have them open up in conversation. So it's not uncommon for many guys to do approaches in London, approach English girls, and then they give you kind of one-word answers, or they don't really invest that much in the conversation. Well, the reason for that, generally speaking, is because they're already tied up. Maybe they've got a boyfriend, or maybe they've got a million other options, and they've got two guys that they like, or whatever. What I'm trying to say basically is that they've got a lot of options. And so therefore, a random guy approaching them on the street, is she going to be necessarily that interested? Perhaps not, realistically. So that's just something to bear in mind. Whereas if you compare that to a tourist girl or a foreign girl who's kind of somewhat recently arrived in the country, she's not going to have a massive social circle. So therefore she's going to be more open to meeting new people, potentially more open to meeting guys as well. So that's something to think about as well. So that's another reason why foreign girls are, or at least they seem more, easier to kind of, get results from compared to English girls. So this whole thing isn't necessarily an English thing to some extent. It's more of a native versus foreigner thing, because the same actually applies in a lot of other countries. If you go to, even go to other European countries like France, Spain, Italy, these countries, you go there, and who do you think is going to be in general more receptive as a demographic, the natives or the foreigners or the tourists? It's always going to be the foreigners and the tourists for the exact same reasons I've just mentioned. So it's not the fact that it's just English girls telling you they've all got boyfriends and give you one-word answers. It's more of a kind of a native thing, especially in the West. Like in most kind of developed countries in Europe, the US, just the West in general, Central Europe as well, the natives are going to be less receptive compared to the travellers, the tourists, the foreigners. It's just how it is. It's a little bit different when you go to more sort of second world countries, Eastern Europe, southeast of Europe, Latin America. The natives tend to be more receptive, but that's also, other factors involved there as well. So the sexual market value of you being a foreigner from another country, Western country, you come over there and you've got higher value compared to the general sort of guys that she tends to be in contact with. So you're automatically, placed in higher value. So there's that. What I would say is that, don't go around avoiding English girls just because you've had difficulty with them in the past. The way I do it is that, if I find her attractive, I'm just going to go in and do it. It just so happens that, in London most of the time they do happen to be foreign girls, just because I find that more attractive, at least on a physical level, but also on a sort of personality level as well. They tend to be a bit more feminine and a bit more down to earth as well. I think there is something also perhaps to be said about British culture, a bit closed off, a bit wary of strangers, perhaps not the most open-minded, etc. That's what I would say about kind of British culture, especially when it comes to the strangers. I think the British are very, very, very easy to kind of open up and speak to when they've had alcohol involved, or they've had a bit of a drink. But if they just come from work and they're completely dead sober, it can be very, very difficult. So, don't go out, doing your sessions thinking, oh, there's something wrong with me necessarily because this girl's giving me one-word answers. It's like, sometimes there's nothing you can do about that. The girl's just not in the mood, she's just not feeling it. It's on her, not you. So don't take these things personally. If you do tend to find a lot of girls saying that they've got boyfriends or giving you one-word answers, not investing that much in the conversation. So yeah, I hope that clears things up a little bit.
Cheers for watching. If you'd be interested in one-to-one coaching with me, where we'll go out in public and work on your approaching girls, or more generally with your social confidence, please visit my website ed-game.com.